You're watching the JJ Podcast.
Well, thanks, ladies, so much for coming along. First of all, ladies, can you just tell us about your movement, who you are, and how this all started?
So we are a group of mums and parents. We dragged our husbands into this. We started at a playgroup in Sanford, out in kind of semi-rural Brisbane, where we were talking about how there needed to be more choice for parents over who was caring for their kids. So we got together and we said, what are we going to do? And then at the same time, the horrific allegations out of Victoria started to break. And we thought this was enough. We couldn't continue to let this happen, and parents needed to have more choice. So we got together on a Sunday night, and at 8 p.m. we pressed publish on a change.org petition, and it has gone from there.
Incredible.
And how many signatures have you got so far on this petition?
Yeah, so we're just under 10,000. So we have been pushing it in as many ways as we can and trying to spread the positive message that our campaign is about parents and them getting involved and having a direct voice to the government by signing our petition and hopefully creating that momentum and saying something needs to change. And we feel with this change, it's not something that requires a significant legislative reform. It's a system that's already there. Yeah. So, and these children are already eligible for it. So that's a lot of what we're trying to get out to people as well. It's not an anti-daycare campaign. It's a campaign that says this is about giving parents the power to choose.
What's the feedback been like so far? Have you heard anything from the Labor government in support of this petition?
Yeah. We have had a really interesting week, and I think Von can probably speak to this as well. We have had our petition mentioned in Parliament already in the Senate this week, and we also have had some significant support from a new Labor senator from Queensland who spoke directly to this issue in her maiden speech. So do you want to talk about it, Von?
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday, Corinne Mulholland did her maiden speech, and it was an incredible speech. And she spoke directly. She had her baby in with her, which was just...
I loved that. It looked awesome. Yeah.
So amazing. And it was a typical, I think it must have been, because I have an 8-month-old, and when I was looking at it, I'm like, it's got to be around that age. You know, at that point where they're just wriggling everywhere and they just want the attention of everyone around them. So it was so beautiful. But her speech was primarily advocating for Queensland families, really Australian families, but saying, you know, she is there to represent Queensland families, working families. She said she knows the juggle, and it is a juggle, right? To juggle it all, family life, working life, and to do all the things, it's a juggle. And she spoke directly to the fact that women especially, there are stats are there. I've got my little baby here.
Yeah, it's cute.
But the stats are there, and I'll say some of the stats that she had were just amazing, and we shared quite a bit of this on our socials, because when you see data, right, that changes things. When you see stats, you go, okay, there is a real issue here. So some of the stats were like $33 billion is lost from an economic productivity perspective, child-related sick days every year. Parents, and mostly mothers in this case, lose 5 to 10 work days a year thanks to the childcare sickness cycle. You know, as we all know, you take them to daycare.
I mean, it's probably even more than that.
Yeah. And it would, right? You feel like it's actually more than that. And then this one, 40% of women take unpaid leave when their sick leave runs out while caring for their sick children.
Do you know what kills me? I'm so sorry to interject. The thing that kills me with the current way that the system is set up, is when that child is sick and you have to keep them home from daycare, you don't get the subsidy and you pay the full amount to not have them there. How does that incentivize people to keep their sick children home?
And this is exactly why we pulled out of childcare. This is my whole experience with childcare. Is we started when my first daughter was 18 months old, because I felt like it was what I had to do. And you get told as mums, you know, they socialise at childcare. It's really good for them. And so, and I wanted to go back to work. I loved my job. And so we put her into childcare. It was this beautiful childcare. It was like out of a Scandinavian magazine. They taught them yoga and Mandarin classes. And it was, you know, like the perfect childcare. And She was so sick that I spent nights driving up and down the highway to get her to sleep because she couldn't lie down. She was so congested. And it was just that I couldn't keep going. And then I ended up catching RSV when I was heavily pregnant from her. And we just went, we can't do this anymore. Yeah. And it wasn't the right thing for her. And now you have this conversation where I still want to be able to work, and that's something that's really important to me, you know, my identity as a person. And you know, we're all mums, like when you have a child, you sometimes lose like, who am I? And that is something that you have from, you know, before being a mum, and it's something that people want to keep. And for some people, they have to keep it, right? It's a financial thing. So why is it only childcare that's the option? And a big thing for us is saying, for some people, childcare is great. You know, some people absolutely they love it, their kids love it, they have a great time. But for other people, it's not. And why should those people miss out on either the opportunity to stay home for longer or to have a different care model for their children and to return to work? So, you know, that sickness element is just one of the things we've heard from people that stops them or changes their childcare experience.
Some of the things that were coming up quite a lot during the last campaign. So this is something that I have been very passionate about changing for a long time as well. And I was more so going down the tax deduction path, but I love the idea that you guys have put forward as well, because you want to be able to just provide that choice. And people kept saying, you know, if your work hours aren't that traditional 9 to 5, what do we do? And another lady said, you know, she was a banker and she said, I'm perceived to be rich, but we can't actually physically afford to send my children to daycare more than 2 days a week. And so she said, I then have to stay home for those other days. And that's one thing that just continuously came up. So for everyone that's listening that might not be aware yet of what you guys are trying to change and to be about choice, it's about getting the money instead of the childcare subsidy going to the centre. You're about it going to the family instead.
Yeah, so what we're saying is we're not asking for any more than we're currently eligible for. We're not saying the government should pay 100% of my nanny or my dad to look after my children. What we're saying is that these families are currently already eligible for the childcare subsidy. And if they were to use a childcare centre tomorrow, the government would pay a childcare centre to look after those kids. Our argument is that the parent should actually have the power and the choice over who is looking after their child for a range of reasons. I mean, safety can be one, but also those work hours, shift workers, FIFO workers, single parents who have a split parenting agreement that don't have their kids every week but have to pay for a childcare centre
every week, even when the children. Yeah, I've never thought about it.
Having that choice over who's looking after their children and giving that power to the parents. So saying you are eligible for this subsidy, the government would pay this subsidy for you tomorrow if you use a childcare centre. How about we give that to the family instead and let them pick the care that works best for them and their schedule and their life and their child.
And there's thousands of families on waitlist as well. Like waitlist is huge.
Yes.
And that's going to get a lot worse come January when they drop the activity test. So they want to guarantee everyone to have 3 days care. That's all good in an ideal world. But if you're going to let the mums that don't work, getting the space in those centres for the women who do, over the women who do have to go to work simply because they got in first, that's going to be a recipe for disaster, certainly in the cities where we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get 3 places at our local daycare now. So like I couldn't, we live semi-rurally, so there's not a massive choice, but I think it's even worse in the cities. But if I put one of the girls' names down in the local daycare here, they couldn't give me 3 days a week.
Which isn't it just crazy?
It is.
Yeah.
And so I think like a lot of our argument is also around, you know, overheads and is it really the best choice to be spending millions and millions of dollars on building daycare centres when there are families that could have alternative care right now?
And I think when you look at the fact that there's 9,000 childcare centres currently across the country with about 1 million kids enrolled in them, and currently $16 billion is being paid by the federal government for subsidies for taxpayers, which is just a huge amount of money.
Yeah, and they're
Enormous.
making $22 billion a year in revenue. So this is big business, right? It's not just a lovely, nurturing, caring environment for kids. It's a massive moneymaker. And we can't we can't argue with that fact either. And I think a lot of that has come to light in the last couple of weeks, with quality safeguards being really questioned and parents rightly saying, how does this happen when the government is giving these businesses so much money?
Has anyone ever asked when the CCS was created, under whichever government the current system was approved, why it was limited to childcare centres and not nannies or au pairs or even family daycare where they have like 4 children?
It's because nannies was always perceived to be a
rich
wealthy
people
solution.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
This is another perception. I don't know with you ladies. There is this perception that you rich bastards can afford it. And I had a look and did some stats about the current system. And right now, in Sydney, Greater Sydney, this isn't our seat, Greater Sydney, the average home is now $1.7 million. In order for an average family to buy an average home at $1.7 million, they need an average mortgage of, say, $1.3 million. To service that $1.3 million mortgage, they need a household income of $300,000 to $350,000. You would assume that they would both be working full-time. $300,000 to $350,000 gives you a subsidy around the 35% mark. That means that if they've got one child in daycare for 4 days a week, after the 35% rebate, they're paying $450 a week for that child, or $23,800 a year. That it is more expensive than sending their child to a private school in year 7. Yeah. That's one child. But that's the average family in Sydney. Yeah. They're not rich bastards.
No, and this is a thing for us. It's a sacrifice that people make out of their wage, and it's something that my family sacrifice out of my wage each week to pay somebody privately. And we can't deny that that's a privilege, right? That's something but it's also a sacrifice, and it's something that families are choosing to do. So I have 2 kids. If you look at sending them to a daycare here in Sanford, it's $155 a day. So $310 a day for my 2 children. And depending on what subsidy I get, for $30 an hour for a nanny for 10 hours a day is equal to, if not less, for a family to purchase to look after those 2 kids.
And she'll often help you around the house. And
so I think that it's actually this policy change we're pushing for doesn't benefit high income earners. It actually benefits lower and middle income earners because they get a higher subsidy. So with that, those statistics that you talk about, $400 a week, that's, a lot of money that you could be paying a nanny or a grandparent or a family member or another carer to look after your child. But if you're on a 90% subsidy that a lot of people are in Australia already, that allows you to do this. It actually becomes really achievable for a lower income family or a middle income family to hire a nanny or to pay a grandparent. And I think that's where this argument is really important, is this isn't about subsidizing rich people's nannies, because those people get a lower subsidy anyway. So they're not getting 100% of their nanny paid for. They're getting the subsidy they would already get if they used childcare.
It's just the flexibility to use it differently.
The other argument to it is that if you're paying a nanny, you're paying, generally they look after 2, and it's generally the same fee, maybe $5 more. So you're actually getting better bang for your buck. Like the government is getting better bang for their buck by passing that money onto the family to use it in the way that they need to.
But it also helps alleviate the capacity issues as well, because you're taking children out of those full centres. I wanted to get your thoughts, ladies, on so Labor announced some new policy ideas just around childcare centres, that if they don't meet safety standards, they can have their funding removed. And we've already seen about 70% of childcare centres receive federal funding. What are your thoughts? I've said this, it's obviously a nice first step, but there's obviously a lot more issues that need to be done and looked at. I can't think of one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't think of one thing within the childcare sector that is being done well. So I guess this is a starting point of getting some action and things happening within the area.
I think for us, our belief is that anything that keeps kids safe should be done. And that should be our bottom line. Like, these are a vulnerable, precious group of our society. And at the moment, parents are losing trust in a system that is not serving them well. But I think what we come back to with those reforms, and when you read the bill, it talks about who was consulted. So the government consulted the unions, they consulted the childcare sector, and they consulted childcare educators. All really important parts of the conversation, but they didn't consult parents. And that's our message, right? We want a voice. We want you to listen to us, and we want choice. And that's what we're asking the government for. We're not saying you need to completely change your reforms or you need to change the entire sector, but you need to listen to parents and you need to listen to them and what they're asking for. And what they're asking for is to have choice.
Have you spoken with any nanny networks? I would assume that this is something that nannies would be very excited to see, because as it stands, because families do not receive any subsidy towards their nanny, you often find that families can only have their nanny 1 or 2 or 3 days. And so the nannies that are out there are working 10 and 11-hour days with certain families and then having to get jobs on the other days with other families. Or in my experience, I volunteer at a mums and bubs play group. We have a lot of nannies that bring children there, and a lot of them have jobs in the evenings. They move from childcare to disability care because they're not getting the hours they need to make their living. But I wonder now, if the families were able to use their subsidy for the nannies, would it push those families to have that nanny for 4 or 5 days a week instead of 2 or 3 days a week? And so there's a domino effect throughout this whole movement where the families benefit, the children benefit, the nanny benefits. If a nanny's working in the disability area at night and she no longer needs to do that because she's getting adequate hours during the week, it opens up another job opportunity for someone else to work in that disability job. So yeah, there's a bit of a domino effect that would be at play.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think so. You're right. No, you go on.
I was just saying the stat on that, and then I'll get you to speak to like the nanny networks. But Australian Financial Review survey in 2019, this was, but you can imagine it would be more now. 46% of working mothers say they would work more if childcare was flexible. So this speaks directly to that. Yeah, all of these groups would get more, like more money, more women would be going back to work, which does so much for our economy. So yes, tick for government right there. Then more people would be getting more hours.
And I think on the nanny perspective, a lot of nannies are casual employees. So they don't get sick leave, holiday pay, they don't get superannuation. So all of those people have to do and manage that themselves. Ideally, this would bring out a way where people could hire a nanny for a longer period of time, and potentially people go into a contract employment arrangement with those people as well and give them certainty of a job. Whereas for some families, and as we've talked about, that financial impact, if you can't afford to have a nanny for more than a day or two, you might not have them one week where you have a grandparent staying with you or something. So those people lose that income, or if they're sick, they don't get sick leave. And so I think a lot of that could be resolved with a subsidy expansion as well, and more certainty for those people with their work.
Yeah. And so what's next with you ladies? Because you've got such great momentum. You're almost at that 10,000 mark for the petition. What's next?
We're going to keep going until someone says yes or someone says no, I think.
We go on a road trip to Canberra and go and put yourselves out there and stand there in Parliament.
For meetings with the Minister and the Prime Minister. We've written and we continue to knock on their door very politely, but we're not going away. This is not something that is we're aware this is not something that's going to be resolved overnight, although it could be.
I was about to say it could be, though. That's what's really frustrating. It actually could be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the government are the people who need to obviously come to the table and have that conversation with us. But we've heard from families all around the country saying, please keep going. We are mums and we have our own jobs and businesses and families as well. But this is something that is a passion project for all of us. And we're not going away.
Yeah, absolutely love it. Definitely don't go away, because this was something that literally came up every time I was out on the streets. Childcare was seriously... but coming across male and female would both be saying to me, I had one guy come up to me in the pub and said, I will vote for you, please, if you can sort out the childcare problem.
It's a stress point for all families. It just really is. And in so many different ways. Can I actually quickly mention Senator Maria Kovacic too, who spoke, to this issue, but also mentioned For Parents, our advocacy group in the Senate this week. We're so grateful for that because it's not just the movement she mentioned. She mentioned all of the families that have signed our petition, the over 9,000 families and people, parents, mums and dads who have said we need more choice when it comes to care. Yes, Senator Maria Kovacic mentioned us. She said the thousands of families calling for greater choice in how they use their childcare. So thank you to both Senator Maria Kovacic and also Senator Corinne Mulholland for representing Australian working families this week. And first week back in Parliament. So it was great to hear.
Yeah, it was good to watch, Maria.
Well, thank you for having us.
No, ladies, well done. Like, you're doing such a good job, honestly. We've both signed your petition because I think what you're doing
forwarded
is
it
awesome.
forwarded it through to a bunch of friends, and we'll continue to do that today.
I'm not exaggerating when I say when I was out doing campaigning, childcare, and because it's the same with us. This is what I've been quoted quite a bit. We paid $57,000 a year at one point for our kids to go to childcare, and they weren't even there full time. And so that's why I went down that tax deduction path, more so just to say we need choice. Like, you need options for families and working mums, and especially now with what's going on in the childcare sector regarding the alleged abuse and all that sort of stuff. No, well, ladies, keep it up. Keep it up. We are cheering you on. It's just awesome what you're all doing.
Everyone sign our petition.
Sign the petition.
Yes.
You don't have to be a mum or a dad to sign it either. Just, anyone.
Yep, supporting the change.
Thank you for listening to the JJ Podcast.